Hey everyone, Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make some cool future beats like James Blake. As usual, you can get the project file and samples and MIDI and all that kind of stuff from this video in the description. And yeah, let's dive in. So, going layer by layer here, I'm going to start with this little lead, which sounds like this. So the way that I made this sound was basically I started with a synth actually. The synth that I started with is this. So essentially, I had that kind of like crazy sounding ARP, and what I did was I bounced it down and just sort of made it half speed, and then repitched it, and that's how you get that kind of like lower, more like droning kind of synth. But yeah, so as far as the synth sound that I started with, it's basically just this thing that I made in analog. So we have a saw wave. It's going into a low pass filter, which has this kind of envelope on it. So it's so you can hear it's kind of, got a little bit of attack. It's a little bit more like open. The amp envelope is just set default. And then I have a bit of vibrato and a bit of unison, and a little bit of delay on the unison as well. So all those are doing is just kind of making it sound, a little bit weirder, a little bit more lo-fi. If I turn those off, I guess it's still kind of cool, but they definitely, add a lot of vibe to the sound. So after that, I have a little bit of reverb, nothing too special there, and I have that going into Smecco's Tape Station. If you don't know what Smecco's Tape Station is, those of you who do know what it is, I know it's a little bit cheating, but in all fairness, I went kind of deep with the sound design on this one. But yeah, so basically what Smecco's Tape Station is this rack made by a guy named Legoville. You may or may not have heard of him before. He's kind of like a house and techno legend, and it just makes things sound really like lo-fi. So the way I use it here, I'll show you without it. So that's cool, but then when you turn it on, you can hear it just adds that kind of like interesting, more like lo-fi texture to it. So after that, I have this auto filter, which is just doing a notch. So I'm just cutting out a little bit of that mid-range there. If you listen without it, it was mostly just because the tape station was adding a lot of like weird stuff in that range, and that's where it can get kind of harsh and like brittle sounding. So yeah, I just put that on. And then after that, we just have a little bit of saturation. I used the A Bit Warmer preset. And yeah. So then, like I said, what I did with that was basically, and I'll do it here real quick. So if I duplicate this, what I did was I bounced it to audio. So you do freeze track, and then once that's done freezing, you just flatten it real quick. But once it's done freezing, basically we can just flatten it real quick, and then we have the file as audio. And then what I did was I just set it to repitch mode, and then use this little button to make it half speed. And there you go. And I just felt like this felt like kind of cooler over the beat. I felt like it flows a little bit more, and it kind of fits more with like the 8th note rhythm that's going on with the hi-hats. You can see if I do that versus like the original version, it just didn't really have that vibe. And this kind of gives it more of that like James Blake, kind of like lo-fi, rough around the edges, synth kind of sound. So the next sound we have is this bass, which sounds like this. This is a pretty straightforward kind of bass. I've heard James Blake use this a ton of times. It's just like a Reese bass. So all I'll show you is 2 saw waves, an operator. There's not any FM going on despite the fact that it is an operator. I have this FM algorithm going, so it's just playing these at the same time in parallel, essentially. And then you can hear it's 2 saw waves, and I detuned the second one a little bit. So that's what gives it that motion. And then I put that into a low-pass filter. I took away most of the high harmonics. And then I added a little bit of chorus after that just to give it a bit more depth and make it kind of nice, just a little bit nicer sounding. This is a sound that James Blake uses a lot for his basses. It really works when you have these like chord progressions that are just kind of longer, more held out notes, and you just need a bass to like sit underneath everything. And it sounded pretty good with the drums as well, like with this kind of kick. It fits nicely. So the next sound we have here is this little like organ kind of sound. It sounds like this. Basically, this is just playing these chords. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure about the voicings of these chords. I kind of just played it in with a keyboard, and this is what sounded really cool at the time. So yeah, but these I was trying to get those kind of like more obscure like James Blake style chords. The thing is he uses a lot of like jazz chords like major and minor sevenths and ninths and elevenths and all those kind of things. He's very heavily inspired by jazz. He said this a lot before in interviews. So I was just trying to go for some more interestingly voiced chords in that vein. And this is what sounded good. So yeah, so I just kind of have those cool chords, and then as far as the sound goes, it's pretty simple. So what I have here is I have a sine wave, and then yeah, just one oscillator doing a sine wave. The amp envelope is set like that, so there's no release in the sustain and decay, or the sustain is all the way down, but the decay is up, I guess, all the way. And then we have no attack, so all this does is it just makes it like one long held out note. So when you play the note and hold it down, you'll get that note. And yeah, so then after that, I just used a little bit of vibrato and unison to kind of bring this to life. I'll show you before those. It's just a basic sine wave. But after those, it has a little bit more of like that kind of like James Blakey vibes. So the vibrato you can hear just gives it that subtle pitch drift. It makes it sound more like analog, and then the unison is what gives it that cool chorusy sound. So yeah, so those are the chords. So next thing I will show you are the drums, which sound like this. They're pretty straightforward. So yeah, pretty simple. There's really not too much to say. I didn't do too much processing on these drums. The hi-hat and the kick and then the open hi-hat are pretty much clean. And then on the snare, I did do a little bit. I just have like this little bit of EQ, and then this ping pong delay. So you can kind of hear that going there. It's just giving it that little bit of echo. And yeah, I felt like it helped again, like rhythmically. It's the same thing I was saying with the lead. It's just like little things like this that you can do that kind of make it fit a little bit better into the track. So that's what I did, and then the EQA is just a little bit of a high boost. I felt like it sounded a little bit better with that. So yeah, so the drums are pretty straightforward. The main thing to focus on with the drums is the programming. Like with James Blake's stuff, he can get some pretty intricate patterns. And sometimes his patterns are pretty simple as well. What I recommend doing is just sort of like, try and make something simple. Like this is really based on a very simple pattern, just like this simple kick and snare halftime pattern. And then sort of add things to mix it up. So like there are some parts here where like I don't have a snare, like here. That part where you're kind of expecting one. And stuff like that that just kind of makes it interesting. As well as like throwing in the open hi-hat was like a nice little percussion as well. Yeah, it's just mostly about the programming with this kind of stuff. So then the last thing we have going here is this little vocal sample in the background, which sounds like this. I'll turn it up a bit. So the way I made this was pretty simple. I just had these two like vocal hits. I think I had sampled these from somewhere a really long time ago. They sounded like this. And this. And then what I did was I just kind of laid them in here in a way that made sense, I guess. And then I reversed the second one. So if I grab this vocal sample 2 file again, and we'll unwarp it real quick, and then warp it again. There we go. So you can see this is the original sample. I just reversed it. I felt like it flowed a little better. It kind of like gave more space between them. And it made it so like you kind of get this bigger thing here at the end of the bar. And then it goes back into the first vocal sample. And then it kind of repeats. I just felt like it was, a little bit more of an interesting thing. And this is really subtle. It's kind of just there to accentuate everything and just add a little bit more depth to the chords. Like if we play it with the chord progression. You can hear it kind of just makes you anticipate that first chord a little bit more, and also kind of builds into the fourth chord a little bit better as well. These just are like that little extra bit of ear candy, that you need to really take your tracks to the next level. We had a pretty solid, little beat here. But then adding stuff like this, like I said, just takes it to the next level, adds that extra little element to it. And yeah. So that's mostly gonna be it for this one. Like I said, the main things to think about are like the interesting lead design where I kind of took it and pitched it down. And then like with the bass and the chords, just making the kind of longer, more like chill chords and bass that sit more in the background. And then with the beats, just kind of like the stuff I was saying about trying to think of interesting things you can do or things you can take away or just ways you can make it a little bit more different and have more of that James Blake kind of vibe. And then with the vocal sample, again, just adding ear candy like this really helps to make your tracks more full and just more professional sounding. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments. And make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Thank you again for watching. You can get the samples and project file and MIDI from this video in the description. And I will see you again tomorrow with another tutorial.